On Monday morning, the city looked like it had been polished overnight. Glass towers caught the sun and threw it across the streets in fierce, glittering stripes. From the 23rd floor of Hamilton Dynamics, the light poured through our windows so bright it felt like a second sky had cracked open over my desk. I cupped my third coffee and tried to steady my breath. The dream had followed me to work again, clinging to me like the scent of rain on wool. In the dream, he was not my boss. In the dream, Ethan Hamilton was only a man. There was no board, no policy binder, no careful distance measured in conference room chairs. There was only the warm hush of his office after hours and the sense that I had stepped through some private door into a life where wanting him was allowed. I would wake with my heart pounding and my palms pressing the sheets as if I could hold myself in place and keep from falling. Then morning would arrive, bright and ordinary, and I would become Lena Brooks again, senior marketing analyst, 2 degrees, a promoted title, a neat stack of reports that said I had earned my seat at this company. I told myself that ambition had no room for crushes. I told myself that attraction was a passing weather pattern and I was the kind of woman who carried an umbrella and kept walking. But there are some storms you cannot outpace. No matter how sensible your shoes, I was staring at a wall of revenue projections when Zoe dropped into the chair beside my desk. A breath of peppermint and hairspray and shameless curiosity. My best friend had a way of making the whole floor feel like our living room. You need water. She said, eyes flicking from my cup to my face. Or maybe a small exorcism. Did you have the dream again? I pressed my lips together, but the heat rose anyway. You are relentless, and you are transparent. She leaned in, hair shining like a black ribbon over her blazer. Tell me only one thing. Was it the windows or the desk this time? Zoe, I hissed, lower your voice. I am using my church voice. She grinned. So which one? I tried for cool and failed. The windows, I admitted, because I never learned how to lie to her. City lights, late night, impossible to breathe. The whole dramatic opera. I know how ridiculous this is. He is the CEO. I am a sensible adult. I can read a handbook. Handbooks are for people without heartbeats. She said, also, he is not blind. Lena, I have seen the way he watches you when you present. It is not a crime to be magnetic. It is a career hazard. I said, and took a swallow of coffee bitter enough to make my eyes water. No matter what you think you have observed, nothing is happening and nothing will happen. I am not that reckless. I am not that foolish. Zoe opened her mouth to argue, then studied me with rare gentleness. I know you are careful. She said, but careful is not the same thing as safe. They feel similar until they do not. And sometimes the safest thing is to tell the truth. The words landed and rippled outward. I looked back at my screen where numbers swam and refused to settle. I reached for the comfort of routine and found only the quick beat of my pulse. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, my best friend from college, 3 time zones away and always awake when I should not be. Her preview line flashed like a dare. Well, did you finally do something about the world's most obvious crush, or are we still starring in the internal soap opera in your head? I breathed out a laugh and typed back, still starring? I wrote, still the same foolish show with the same impossible lead. I described last night's dream with the shorthand we used for everything. The office after hours, the way he said my name, the way desire can feel like a door clicking open when you have been pressing your ear to the frame for months. It was a relief to confess what I kept caged. I added more detail than I should have. The look that says I have been seen and chosen, the way certainty settles in your bones when someone steps closer instead of away. The feeling of glass against my back and the city below, like 1,000 witnesses and not one of them mattered. I ended with a line about how none of it would ever happen, because I loved my job more than I loved any fantasy. And I set the phone face down like I had just placed a secret back where it belonged. 5 minutes later, my phone began to dance across the desk. One buzz, then another, then a staccato that made Zoe lift her brows. "You are popular," she said. The screen was filled with notifications. Dozens. Then more than that, I unlocked the phone and felt the floor tilt. My message thread was not open to Rachel at all. It was open to the Hamilton Dynamics Company channel, the channel meant for safety notices and quarterly town halls, the channel with a membership list that ran the length of the corporate org chart and ended with the CEO. For a second, I did not feel my hands. For a second, there was only sound, an ocean roar inside my head. Then the comments started arriving like hail. "Oh, my word. Well, that is one way to start a Monday. Is this a drill? Is this a warning?" Then the mix of sincere and unkind, the shocked emojis, the laughing faces, the stunned silence that is somehow visible when 1,000 people all stop at once. Zoe went very still, the way a person does when a glass has already fallen and she is measuring the crash. "Lena," she said softly, "breathe." My eyes burned. I wanted to rewind a single careless minute. I wanted to curl into the smallest possible shape and slide into a desk drawer and shut it from the inside. Instead, I watched a new line appear at the bottom of the company feed. It was the only message that did not swim. "Lena Brooks, please report to my office. Ethan." The name looked impossible on my screen. It had weight. It had weather. It sounded like the beginning of a storm. Zoe squeezed my arm. "You have to go," she said, as if I might forget how to stand. "You cannot outrun this. Face it and tell the truth. The truth is the only thing that stands up after a fall." I nodded, though my body felt borrowed. I rose, heads turned. A few people tried to look away and failed. The walk to the elevator felt both too long and not long enough. I pressed the button and watched my reflection waver in the steel. My face was pale. My mouth had forgotten how to smile. I remembered my first day at Hamilton Dynamics. How proud I had been to wear my badge. How the doors had opened like opportunity and not judgment. A lifetime ago. Or maybe only months. When the elevator arrived, I stepped inside alone. The doors slid shut with a sound that reminded me of a page turning. We climbed. I counted floors I could not see. The car hummed and the numbers lit one by one, climbing toward the world I only knew from quarterly briefings and glimpses of a hallway when I had delivered an urgent report. The 35th floor belonged to him. When the doors opened, the air felt cooler. Bitter. Like the lobby of a museum with a single priceless exhibit. The reception desk stood like a sentry post. Behind it, Helen Ward looked up from her screen. She had the calm of a woman who had navigated a dozen corporate storms and could tell the difference between show and weather. Her gaze took me in. Not unkind. "He is expecting you," she said. "Go right in." My legs did their best imitation of legs. The hall to his office was shorter than I imagined. I had thought there would be a long ceremonial walk full of judges and witnesses and trumpets. There were only a few steps and then the glass door and my reflection inside it like a second self. My hand lifted to knock. "Come in," said his voice. The sound slid through the door and over my skin. Familiar in the way of audiocasts and town halls, and yet different when addressed to only one person. Addressed to me. I pushed the door and stepped into a room that had starred in my sleep. Windows ran from floor to ceiling and held the city like a painting. The desk was a clean sweep of dark wood and glass. Shelves rose behind it, lined with awards and books arranged with the ease of a man who knows what he values. And at the center of it, Ethan Hamilton, hands folded, eyes steady, the quiet at the core of a hurricane. He was exactly as he always looked from a distance, and nothing like that at all up close. Presence is a strange thing to feel in a room. It is not height. It is not a perfect suit. It is the sense that gravity has chosen a new center and you have stepped into its circle. Close the door, he said. The click sounded like a verdict. I crossed to the chair he indicated and sat on the edge. A careful student on the first day of a difficult class. My heart tried to make itself heard through my ribs. I did not trust my voice to survive an apology without breaking. But silence felt like a kind of lie. I am sorry, I said. The words tumbled out like pebbles. It was meant for my friend. I would never have used the company channel, and I do not know how I did, and I understand that this is inexcusable. I understand the policies, and I respect them, and I respect you, and I have no defense except the truth, which is that the message was private and foolish and not meant for anyone here to read. He did not interrupt. He did not look impatient. He watched me the way a person watches the horizon when he is deciding whether to trust the weather report or his own bones. When I ran out of words, I folded my hands together to keep them still. The city stretched behind him, dazzling, unbothered. After a moment, he spoke. His voice was even the same one that negotiated acquisitions and soothed investors and set whole divisions at ease. Only this time it was not broadcast to 1,000 listeners. Only this time it belonged to a conversation and not a performance. I read your message. Lena, he said, so did everyone else. It was very detailed. Heat raced to my face. I wanted the floor to open and deliver me to a basement where fluorescent lights and old filing cabinets could hide me until I learned how to breathe again. He continued before I could drown. There are policies we must address. There are safeguards I am obligated to uphold. We will do that. But before we begin the formal part, I am going to ask you a simple question. His gaze held mine without flinching. Is what you wrote true? The room narrowed to that question. Not the reprimand I deserved. Not the dismissal I had braced for. A question that lifted the careful lid I had kept on my life and set it aside. My mouth was dry. My mind wanted to run to safer ground and could not find any. Truth is heavy until you speak it. Then it becomes a bridge. I swallowed. Yes. I said, it is true. He inhaled, slow and measured, as if he had been waiting for the shape of that word. For a heartbeat, the room felt different, as if some invisible line had been drawn and now both of us could see it. We will talk about next steps. He said, we will do this properly, but not yet. I sat in that pause, aware of everything at once. The sunlight shifting across the floor, the cooled coffee in my stomach, the soft scratch of Helen typing outside the door, the thud of my pulse, and under it all, the quiet certainty that something had just begun. Not with a kiss, not with a promise, but with a mistake and a truth told out loud. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was on my feet again. My palms were cold, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to find an escape. Ethan stood from behind his desk. moving with the same calm precision he used in board meetings. Only this time, there was no board, no investors, no audience, just the two of us and the echo of my confession hanging between us. He didn't look angry. That, somehow, made it worse. Sit, Lena, he said quietly, gesturing toward the chair again. His tone wasn't sharp, but it carried a weight that made it impossible to disobey. I sat, my hands gripping the edge of the seat to keep them from shaking. He leaned against the front of his desk, arms folded across his chest, studying me. The sunlight poured in behind him, outlining his figure like a painting of restraint and authority. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck as I remembered every single word I had typed that morning. Every sentence that had turned me from a competent professional into the headline of the company gossip feed. "Do you understand what just happened?" he asked. "Yes." "Sir," my voice sounded small, the way it does when you're a child caught doing something terribly wrong. "Don't call me sir," he said softly. "This isn't an interrogation. I just need clarity." He took a slow breath and continued. "You sent an explicit message about me to the entire company. Every employee read it. HR has already contacted me. My assistant nearly had a panic attack. You have to know that this could have serious consequences for both of us." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know, and I'll take full responsibility. I'll resign if that's what it takes." Ethan's eyes flicked up sharply. "Resign? I violated company policy." I said, forcing the words out even though my voice trembled. "It was unprofessional and inappropriate. I've humiliated myself and probably you. I don't see how I could stay." He didn't answer right away. He looked at me with an unreadable expression, the kind that made people call him one of the most composed men in the industry. Finally, he said, "You think I called you here to fire you?" My eyes widened. "Didn't you? No." He said simply. The word landed like a stone in a still pond. I blinked, confused. "Then why did you call me here?" He hesitated, his gaze steady but softer than I had ever seen it. "To talk, to understand, and, if I'm being honest, to decide what comes next." My breath caught. "What comes next?" Ethan exhaled slowly, almost as if he were buying time. "Lena, you're one of the most talented analysts I've ever worked with. You've helped secure 3 of our biggest client accounts this quarter. You've made this company stronger." His lips pressed into a faint, reluctant smile. "One message, no matter how mortifying, doesn't erase that." I stared at him. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm angry," he said, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. "Not at you. At the situation. At how easily something private became public. At the thought that this might ruin someone who doesn't deserve to be ruined." His words made my chest ache. I didn't know what to say. Ethan moved closer, just enough for me to smell his cologne, clean and woodsy, the kind that lingered even after he left a room. He braced his hands on the edge of the desk, leaning down slightly, his voice lowered. "Kidder now, almost intimate. When I asked if what you wrote was true, you said yes." "Yes," I whispered. "Then I need to ask something else. Did you mean it?" Every word. My pulse raced. The question felt dangerous. "It was a fantasy," I said carefully. "Something private? I didn't mean for anyone to ever see it." That's not what I asked." His voice was gentle but firm. "I'm asking if the feelings were real." I forced myself to look at him. Yes, I said, finally. They were real. They are real. I've been fighting them since the day I started here. I didn't want them. I didn't plan them. But I can't pretend they don't exist. For a moment. The room was utterly silent. The city stretched out behind him, glittering through the glass. And I felt like I was watching my entire life tilt on its axis. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He looked away, then back at me. You have no idea how hard I've tried to keep my distance. He said, almost to himself, from the day you walked into your interview, I knew I was in trouble. My heart stopped. What he gave a small, almost rueful laugh. You sat across from me in that gray suit, completely confident, completely brilliant. You told me everything that was wrong with our marketing strategy without blinking. And you were right. I should have known better than to hire you. I told myself I was being objective, but I wasn't. Not entirely. I couldn't move. You noticed me, noticed you. He smiled faintly. Lena, I haven't stopped noticing you. Every time you walk into a meeting, every time you present a report, I see you trying to hide behind your professionalism. And every time, it takes everything in me not to react. I felt dizzy. But you never said anything. You never, because I couldn't. He cut in, his voice sharper now. Because I'm your boss. Because there are rules for a reason. Because my father built this company and destroyed people by blurring lines like that. I swore I'd never do the same. He ran a hand through his hair, the perfect composure cracking just slightly. You don't understand. Lena, I thought if I kept it strictly professional, these feelings would fade. But they didn't. They got stronger. And now after your message, everything we've been trying to hide is out in the open. I sat frozen, the air heavy between us. So what do we do? I asked softly. Ethan's gaze locked with mine. That's exactly the question. The boundary's already broken. HR will demand explanations. The press might even hear about this if someone leaks it. The only thing we can control now is how honest we're willing to be. He moved closer, slowly, deliberately until he was standing right in front of me. His voice dropped low enough that I could feel it as much as hear it. So, Lena, tell me, what do you want to do? I could barely breathe. Every instinct told me to run, to apologize again, to beg him to forget this ever happened. But another voice, quieter and stronger, whispered something different. That maybe it was time to stop hiding behind fear. I don't know what's right anymore. I admit it, but I know what I want. And what's that? I said, the word trembled out of me before I could stop it. Even if it's complicated, even if it's reckless. Ethan's expression softened into something I couldn't name, part relief, part hunger, part disbelief. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing my jaw. Then let's stop pretending, he said quietly. But we do it the right way. No secrets, no lies, full disclosure to HR. We make it official. My breath caught as his thumb traced a line along my cheek. And then I whispered, then, he said, leaning in so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. We see where honesty takes us. He paused, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. The kiss was inevitable, the kind that doesn't surprise you when it happens because some part of you has been waiting for it forever. His lips were warm and steady, tasting faintly of coffee and restraint finally breaking. My hands found his shoulders before I could think. And for one dizzy second, everything, fear, embarrassment, logic disappeared. When he finally pulled back, Both of us were breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. "We should stop," he murmured. "Before this becomes another headline." "You're right," I said, though my voice trembled. He straightened, his composure returning like armor sliding back into place. "We go to HR. We make this transparent. And then, Lena, I'm taking you to dinner, not as your boss, as the man who's wanted you for far too long." I nodded, still dazed. "Okay." He smiled slightly, holding out his hand. "Come on, let's do this properly." As I slipped my hand into his, I realized that the worst mistake of my life had just become the start of something I couldn't have imagined. The elevator ride down to HR felt like a descent into judgment. But Ethan's grip was steady, grounding, and as the doors closed, I thought whatever happened next, at least I was finally being honest. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than the climb up to his office. Every floor we passed added another layer of nerves until I was sure they could hear my heart from the control panel. Ethan's hand was still holding mine, firm and unflinching. And somehow that steadiness kept me from unraveling completely. When the doors opened, the familiar hallway looked different, too bright, too loud. A few coworkers froze mid-conversation as we stepped out together. Whispers darted through the air like invisible birds. "There she is. That's her. He's with her." Ethan didn't look at anyone. His focus was straight ahead, calm and composed, as though he had walked through scandal before and survived. The HR department at Hamilton Dynamics was designed to feel safe, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, inspirational quotes framed in glass. Today, it felt like a courtroom behind the reception desk. The HR director, Margaret Allen, rose as soon as we entered. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes missed nothing. "Mr. Hamilton, Miss Brooks, please come in." Her office was tidy to the point of precision, a neat desk, 2 identical chairs, and a window that looked out over the skyline. I sat first, trying to keep my hands still in my lap. Ethan took the seat beside me, his posture straight but unguarded. Margaret closed the door and folded her hands on the desk. "I assume you both understand why we're here." I nodded quickly. "Yes. I made a terrible mistake this morning." Ethan raised a hand slightly, and I fell silent. "We'd like to explain the situation fully," he said evenly. "A private message was sent to the company channel by accident. It contained personal content regarding me. It was never intended to be public." Margaret inclined her head. "I've read it, and yes, it was certainly personal." Her tone wasn't judgmental, but I still felt the sting of shame. "Miss Brooks, I need to ask you directly, are the feelings expressed in that message genuine?" My throat went dry. But lying wasn't an option anymore. "Yes, they're real," I said quietly. "I've never acted on them. I've always kept things professional. The message was private and inappropriate. But the feelings are true." Margaret made a note on her pad, then turned to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Hamilton, what is your position?" Ethan's gaze flicked toward me before he answered. "I reciprocate those feelings." He said simply, "I have for some time. I understand my role carries authority, and I've maintained professional boundaries to avoid impropriety. However, after this morning's events, there's no sense in pretending otherwise. What I feel for Ms. Brooks is genuine." The admission landed like a spark in the air. I exhaled slowly. unsure if it was relief or fear leaving my lungs. Margaret was silent for a long moment, studying us both. Then here's what happens next. She said, finally, Hamilton Dynamics allows relationships between employees provided they are disclosed and documented, given your positions. However, we must remove the direct reporting line. She turned to me. That means you can't continue under Mr. Hamilton's supervision. We'll need to transfer you to a separate department. I hesitated. Will that affect my position or pay? No. She said firmly, you'll keep your title and your current compensation. I'll recommend the creative department. They've been requesting a senior analyst for months. Director Peterson will oversee you from now on. Ethan nodded. That's acceptable. Good. Margaret said, she slid a form across the table. You'll both need to sign a relationship disclosure agreement. Its standard confirms that the relationship is consensual and that neither party is under pressure or coercion. Once this is signed, HR will handle the official announcement. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling just slightly. The document looked sterile, impersonal, yet the meaning behind it was anything but. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then signed my name. When Ethan took the pen next, his signature was bold, confident, final. Margaret gathered the papers, her expression softening a little. You should also know, she said, that the message will live on the company servers. I've already instructed IT to archive it, but not delete it. Transparency requires that we document what happened. My stomach twisted, so it's permanent in the records. Yes, she said gently, but what people remember fades faster than you think. Handle this with maturity, and it will become old news within a week. Ethan's voice was steady. We intend to... Then one more thing, Margaret added, looking from him to me. You're both aware that gossip will happen. Some employees will assume Miss Brooks received preferential treatment. Others will assume this started long before today. I can't stop that. The only way through is honesty and composure. Don't hide. Don't defend. Just keep working. Keep delivering results. The truth always steadies the story. Ethan nodded once. Understood. Margaret stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'll send an internal memo confirming the transfer by end of day. And for what it's worth, she added, her tone unexpectedly kind. I've seen office scandals ruin people who handled them poorly. You both seem determined to do this the right way. That will make all the difference. Thank you, I said softly. When we left HR, the air in the hallway felt lighter, though the weight of the morning still clung to me. As soon as the door closed, Ethan turned to me. You handled that perfectly, he said quietly. I felt like I was shaking the whole time. You were, but you didn't break. I tried to smile. What happens now? He glanced at his watch, then at me. Now, he said, I think we both need food, and maybe 10 minutes away from fluorescent lighting. I blinked. You're taking me to lunch, not as your boss. He said, his voice gentler now. That part's officially over. We stepped into the elevator again. For once, I wasn't thinking about the whispers behind the glass walls. I was thinking about what honesty might look like outside of a boardroom, about how strange it felt to breathe without hiding. The restaurant he chose was a quiet Italian place a few blocks away. All brick walls and soft music. When we sat down, the tension in my shoulders began to melt. For the first time, I could look at him without thinking of reports or deadlines or quarterly goals. He was just Ethan, a man who looked tired but somehow lighter, like someone who'd stopped carrying a secret. I didn't think you'd still want to be seen with me today, I said, trying for humor. He smiled. Faint but real. You underestimate me. The waiter brought menus, neither of us opened. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It felt like quiet ground being built. I meant what I said earlier. Ethan said finally, "You're brilliant at what you do. That's why I hired you. Not because of this. I know," I said, "and for what it's worth, I never expected you to notice me. I noticed you the moment you challenged me in that first meeting." He said, "You were the only person in the room who didn't flinch when I disagreed." I admired that. Admired. The word warmed something in me that had been cold since the morning began. He leaned back, studying me the way someone studies an idea they want to understand fully. My father used to say that power and desire don't belong in the same room. He said quietly. He proved that by destroying people who trusted him. I built this company trying to be the opposite of him. And then you walked in and made me question every wall I'd built. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said the only thing that felt true, maybe walls aren't always meant to keep people out. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right person to knock. Ethan's mouth curved into a slow, genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. You have a dangerous way with words. Lena, we talked for a long time about work and family and things that had nothing to do with scandal. I learned he loved classic jazz, that he'd once wanted to be an engineer before business took over his life. He asked about my writing, something I hadn't told anyone at the company. When I admitted that I used to write stories in college, small, romantic ones that never saw daylight, he grinned. "So that's where the detail in your message came from." I buried my face in my hands. "Please don't remind me." He laughed softly. It was vivid. "Stop." "All right." He held up his hands in surrender, still smiling, for the first time that day. I laughed, really laughed, and the sound felt like freedom. When the check came, Ethan paid before I could argue. As we stood to leave, he looked at me seriously. "We've done the hard part. We were honest, transparent. The rest is about patience." I finished, "And trust." He said that too, outside. The sunlight was sharp and clear. He offered me his hand again, not as a superior or a savior, but as someone standing on the same uncertain ground. I took it without hesitation. The city moved around us, taxis, chatter, traffic, but for the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about what people might say. I was thinking about what comes after disaster. Maybe it wasn't ruin. Maybe it was simply the beginning of something new. That night, I sat on my couch staring at the city through my apartment window. The skyline glittered like a promise I wasn't sure I believed in yet. My phone was silent. But my mind wasn't. Every moment from the day replayed in loops the mortifying message, the walk of shame through the office, the unexpected gentleness in Ethan's voice, and that kiss that had rewritten everything I thought I knew about self-control. Part of me wanted to call Zoe and spill everything. But another part, the one still reeling from the chaos, wanted to keep this small and private, just for now. Honesty had cost me enough for one day. Maybe it could buy me a little silence tonight. A soft knock startled me. For one irrational second, I thought it might be a neighbor complaining about the noise I wasn't making. But when I opened the door, Ethan stood there. No suit jacket this time. No tie, just a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and a look that made my stomach twist in that dangerous, wonderful way. I should have texted. He said, voice low, but I wasn't sure what to say in a message. May I come in? I hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Yeah, of course. He entered quietly, his eyes taking in the tidy apartment, the books stacked on the coffee table, the half-finished cup of tea, the faint music humming from my speakers. It suits you, he said, warm, thoughtful, a little chaotic in the corners. Are you calling my apartment messy? Mr. Hamilton, he smiled faintly. Ethan, he corrected. Please, no more formalities. We signed those away this afternoon. Hearing him say it out loud made something inside me unclench. Ethan, I repeated, testing the sound. It fit, somehow not the name of a CEO, but of a man. He studied me for a long moment before speaking again. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm not sure I know what okay even means anymore. I said honestly, but I'm surviving. That counts, right? He nodded slowly, moving closer until we were standing a breath apart. It counts. He murmured, but I don't want you to just survive this. I want you to know you're safe. That what happened today doesn't define you. It doesn't define us. I looked up at him, trying to find the edges of what we were now. Us. I repeated. The word felt fragile, like something still forming. Ethan's hand brushed mine. Tentative, but sure. If you want it to be, he said, for a moment. Neither of us spoke. The city hummed outside, a low pulse of life moving on without us. Then I nodded. I do. He exhaled, as if he'd been holding that breath all day. Then we start here. He lifted his hand to my face, fingers tracing the line of my jaw. Slow and reverent. I didn't move away. I didn't want to. The air between us was charged, the same electricity that had sparked in his office, but warmer now, stripped of tension and hierarchy. When he kissed me this time, it wasn't cautious. It wasn't tentative. It was hungry. Certain, real. My hands found the fabric of his shirt, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath it. His mouth tasted of coffee and resolve. And when he deepened the kiss, I forgot every reason I told myself to stay away. He pulled back just enough to whisper against my lips, tell me to stop. And I shook my head. Don't stop. The words were all the permission he needed. The night unfolded like a confession we both had been waiting months to speak. It wasn't about fantasy anymore, not the dream version that had haunted me, but something better. Something honest. Ethan was careful, deliberate in every touch, every breath, every pause that asked without words, is this okay? And every time, my answer was yes. Afterward, we lay tangled in the quiet. My head rested on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns across my shoulder. Outside, the city lights shifted. And for the first time, I felt the world slow down. This changes everything. I said softly, I know. Are you ready for that? He turned his head toward me. I've been ready since the day you walked into my office with that presentation about our ad campaign and argued with me for 20 minutes straight. I laughed quietly. I thought you hated me that day. I did. He admitted, but only because you were right. We lay there in comfortable silence for a while before Ethan spoke again. I want to be clear about something. What we're building, it can't exist in the shadows. No secrets. No pretending. We'll face the gossip. The stares. All of it. but I'll make sure no one at this company disrespects you because of this. Because of us, I looked up at him. You can't protect me from everything. Ethan, I can try, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. But I think you're strong enough that you won't need me to. That made me smile. You really think so? I know so. I believed him. And that was the scariest part, how easily I trusted him when everything about this should have terrified me. The next morning, he insisted on driving me to work. The rumor mill had already exploded overnight. I saw it in the way people's eyes followed us through the lobby, the way conversations stopped mid-sentence when we passed. But Ethan's hand found mine just before the elevator doors closed. And suddenly the noise didn't matter. Margaret's official memo had gone out that morning, effective immediately. Miss Lena Brooks has been reassigned to the creative department under Director Peterson. Hamilton Dynamics reaffirms its commitment to professionalism, transparency, and respect in the workplace. It was diplomatic and sterile, exactly what it needed to be. Still, whispers followed me through the day. A few colleagues avoided eye contact. Others offered awkward smiles. Zoe, on the other hand, met me at my new desk with an expression that said, "Tell me everything right now. You survived." She said, hugging me, and judging by that new glow, I'm guessing you did more than survive. I laughed, shaking my head. Zoe, please, oh, don't worry. She said, grinning, everyone's talking already, but most of them are impressed, not judgmental. Apparently, the CEO actually walking into HR hand in hand with you set a new company record for bravery. I blinked. He did what you didn't see. Half the office caught it on video before IT could scrub it. You two looked like a movie scene. My face burned. Great. Just what we needed. Zoe squeezed my arm. Hey, own it. You both handled this with honesty. That's rare. Give it a week, and the next scandal will distract everyone. She was right. By the end of the week, the whispers had softened into curiosity, then into acceptance. Work resumed. Deadlines returned. And life moved forward. Only now, life included Ethan not as my boss, but as something infinitely more personal. We started small coffee breaks in the courtyard, late night conversations about everything and nothing. He asked about my writing. And one evening, when I admitted I missed it, he brought me a leather-bound notebook. For the stories you haven't told yet, he'd written on the first page, some nights he stayed at my apartment. Other nights, I stayed at his. It wasn't perfect. We argued sometimes, mostly about work boundaries or my stubborn independence, but even those moments felt alive. Real, worth it. One night, as we sat on his balcony watching the city lights below, he said quietly, "You know, I used to think love was a distraction, something that slowed people down. And now I think it's the thing that reminds you what you're working for." I turned toward him, the wind tugging at my hair. "You're getting poetic on me. Mr. Hamilton," he smiled, that rare, unguarded kind of smile. "You started it, Ms. Brooks." He leaned in, kissed me, and the city disappeared again. That was the night I realized love doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it crashes into your life like an accident you never saw coming. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to stop running, you find out that what you thought was disaster was actually destiny. 6 months later, The scandal that once consumed Hamilton dynamics had become company folklore, the story whispered with laughter over coffee breaks, retold with a mix of disbelief and envy. The analyst who sent her fantasy to the CEO who fell for her anyway. I used to cringe every time someone mentioned it. Now, I could almost smile, because it had led me here to a life I hadn't dared to imagine. My mornings began not with panic, but with sunlight spilling across Ethan's kitchen, the smell of coffee, and the sound of his voice reading the news aloud while I typed at my laptop. I still kept my old apartment, though I spent fewer and fewer nights there. We hadn't made any official move-in announcement, we just happened, one drawer at a time, one toothbrush, one spare shirt that never left his closet. Work had settled into something stable. I thrived in the creative department, where ideas mattered more than hierarchy. Director Peterson treated me with respect and subtle curiosity, the kind that said he knew about my past but judged me only by my present. And every so often, when I crossed paths with Ethan in the building, our eyes met in that quiet, secret way that said, I remember how this started. And I'd choose it again. Still, being with Ethan wasn't some perfect fairy tale. We learned quickly that love doesn't erase conflict. It just changes how you fight. Our first real argument happened over dishes of all things. He wanted them done right away. I preferred finishing my glass of wine first. It spiraled into a discussion about control, boundaries, and the ghosts of both our pasts. He apologized first, in that rare, vulnerable way that stripped him of his CEO armor. I apologized next, realizing that independence didn't mean pushing someone away. After that, things were easier. We learned the rhythm of each other's worlds, and then came the night everything changed again. It was late February, cold enough that the air bit at our cheeks. Ethan had insisted on taking me to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where we'd shared our first meal after HR. The host led us to the same corner table, the one with soft lighting and a view of the snow-dusted street. We ordered our usual his red wine, my sparkling water, a shared plate of ravioli we'd probably eaten a dozen times before. Conversation flowed easily, laughter filling the small pauses. I was telling him about a creative campaign I'd just wrapped when he reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, I thought he was pulling out his phone. Then I saw the velvet box. My breath caught. Ethan smiled, but his eyes were serious. I know it's fast. He began, and I know most people would say we're breaking every sensible rule in the book, but Lena, I've never believed in rules as much as I believe in timing, and this feels like the right one. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, the kind of design that didn't shout but still took your breath away. 6 months ago, he continued, I thought that message would destroy my career. Instead, it brought me the one person who's made my life make sense again. You challenge me. You calm me. You make me better. So he exhaled, his composure slipping into something beautifully human. Will you marry me? For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then I nodded, tears blurring everything into light. Yes. I whispered, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and the restaurant erupted in soft applause. I laughed through the tears, and he pulled me into a kiss that was tender, steady, the opposite of our first. That one had been born of chaos. This one was built on peace. The following weeks blurred into celebration and disbelief. HR handled the official paperwork with clinical efficiency, issuing a formal statement that might as well have been titled Love and Compliance with Corporate Policy. Zoe was ecstatic, claiming she'd seen this ending from the start. You two are the office legend now. She said, smirking, Hamilton Dynamics finally has a fairy tale. We married in spring. The ceremony was small, just close friends, my parents, his sister, and Zoe, who stood proudly as my maid of honor. The venue overlooked the city skyline where it had all begun. When I walked down the aisle, Ethan's eyes found mine and everything else disappeared. During our vows, he said, what started as an accident became the most deliberate choice of my life. I could barely say mine through the tears. When he kissed me, applause rose again, this time not out of surprise, but joy. Later, as we danced under the lights, I leaned close and whispered, do you ever think about that message? He chuckled softly. Every day, and I thank fate for having the worst sense of humor imaginable. 2 years passed before I realized how far we'd come. I was in our home office, finishing the final chapter of my first novel. The story followed a woman who accidentally confessed her love to the wrong audience and found everything she didn't know she was searching for. Fiction, technically, though anyone who knew us would recognize the truth behind it. Ethan appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. How's the ending coming? Almost done? I said, smiling up at him. I just need to find the right last line. He set a mug beside my laptop and leaned over my shoulder, scanning the words on the screen. You already found it, he said softly. Sometimes mistakes are just miracles with bad timing. I turned to him, laughing. That's not bad. Maybe I'll keep it. He kissed my forehead. You should. And then he hesitated, a different kind of seriousness in his eyes. I have some news. My heart stuttered. Good or bad, complicated. He said, the board wants to expand to London. They want me to lead the branch for at least a year, maybe 2. I blinked, the words sinking in. London. He nodded slowly. I told him I'd think about it, but I won't say yes unless you want to go with me. I stood facing him fully. Ethan, my work's remote now. My novel's portable. You're my home, not a place. His expression softened. You really mean that? Of course. He smiled, then that quiet, breathtaking smile that still undid me. You make everything too easy. Lena Brooks. Or maybe, I said, looping my arms around his neck. We just stopped making life harder than it has to be. He kissed me, long and slow. And I thought of the girl I'd been 2 years ago, the one trembling in his office. Certain her life was over. If I could tell her anything, it would be this. Sometimes the worst mistake is the doorway to everything you've ever wanted. A month later, as our plane descended into the gray London morning, Ethan reached for my hand. You realize, he said, grinning, that everyone at headquarters still remembers that infamous message. Good. I said, squeezing his fingers. Let them. It's proof that honesty can be messy and still end beautifully. He laughed, leaning over to kiss the top of my head. Remind me to frame that line somewhere in the office. Only if you add a footnote. I teased, accidentally sent by Lena Brooks, redeemed by Ethan Hamilton. He chuckled. Deal. Outside the window. The city stretched wide and full of possibility. A new chapter waited another story. Another skyline. Another beginning that might one day turn into legend. I turned to him, smiling, ready to make more mistakes, only with you. He said, and as the plane touched down, I realized that love, at its core, is nothing more than the courage to leap again and again, trusting that this time the fall will feel like flight. The end.